The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
Donald Trump wants to form a commission to fix college football.
You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers.
Donald Trump taking on NCAA and trying to shake up college football and their future. The president is going to form or wants to form a presidential commission on college athletics. And to me, it's pretty surprising, could be very impactful for how college football will be in the next few years. And Clemson fans and all of college football fans need to pay attention for sure. Clemson, sits in the forefront of college football. They are one of the schools out there that want to be relevant when it comes to college football. Not every college football program out there, I know shockingly enough for me to admit this out loud, but not everybody wants to be able to be the best or win a national championship with college football. Clemson is not that way. They want to be competitive, not just competitive. They want to be able to compete at an elite level, and not just on the football field, but when it comes to revenue generation, when it comes to their facilities and their coaching staffs as well. So NIL has played a big role, as we've seen. Transfer portal is taking college football over by storm. And Donald Trump now wants to get involved to investigate exactly what's going on with how athletes could possibly get employed and how that's going to really work out in the long term. I understand that the competitive balance is a big problem, and Clemson has already, made it known that they want to have a future where college football is balanced competitively, not only in their own conference in the ACC, but in college football as a whole. And right now, the competitive balance, maybe it was never really there, but it's even worse now that everything's kind of allowed. And the one thing I've said over the past couple of months is I would love for this to actually be the opposite. I don't want college football to be, overtaken by lawyers and judges from all over the country that have all different kind of views. I think that would be a disaster for the sport. And so if these players need to become a union, if the league needs to be separated, and even if the teams need to separate themselves as a unique entity away from the university, in order to get away from this craziness of being legislated as a university and a state and government entity, that is what needs to happen. Because the more government oversight I see happening, my opinion is it is going to get worse, and it's not going to get better. It's going to be the most inefficient sport that is ran out there. And it's going to get to a point where the inefficiencies are so bad, and the demand for equality amongst everything is going to actually make things worse. You're not going to be able to have a competitive sporting environment if you let the government and a bunch of different lawyers and judges take over, because they could rewrite everything in just one piece of legislation, and I don't think that's good. I think that what I'd love to see is people that are actually invested. And Dabo Swinney has made this a ton, has talked about this a ton, because I think guys like Nick Saban need to be involved. Now, the good thing is that Donald Trump is on the same page with me as far as that is concerned. The early reports out there are saying that Nick Saban has already met with Donald Trump in Alabama, in Tuscaloosa, and could have a major role in this. So if that's the case, that makes me feel a little bit better. But I still would love for college football as a whole to get away from overarching government oversight with how it goes. So I expect there to be at least from preliminary reports, I expect there to be an emphasis on trying to have as traditional of a structure of college football that we've known. I do feel like that Donald Trump is a huge college football fan. We know that Nick Saban is really invested in making sure that college football is still preserved. We know that guys like Dabo Swinney, if he ever were to retire, would probably also be in one of those roles to try to preserve college football and the uniqueness that is there, and not just make it another semi-professional league out there or another non-NFL league that is professional out there. It sounds good. I still am very cautious, though. It sounds good to say Nick Saban. It sounds good to say preserving tradition, but it's still the government, And so there's politics involved. There's, judges and lawyers that have their own agendas. And I don't know if I fully trust them to be able to handle a college football or even any kind of sporting league properly over time. I think it will get to the point where it'll get bogged down by a ton of rules and legislation. And I don't want that at all. If you get federal law involved, to me, that scares me the most. But it seems as if this may be where we're continuing. I don't think politicians want to get away from it. There's a lot of politicians out there that are huge college football fans, and they want to be involved because they know that their voters are huge college football fans. So if they're involved, their voters are involved, they're going to keep continuing to push for that and continue to have their hand in the cookie jar, if you will. I don't know if it'll be better or for worse, but I do have some concerns that it could be more for worse than for better. But we need to keep an eye on this because it's going to impact how Clemson is going forward. It's going to impact college football as a whole. But I expect more and more uncertainty before we get even any answers. That's my thing. I think that, guys like Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney can be critical in making sure that this is done right if they are involved. But if they're not, then that really worries me a ton. Any federal action or approval or disapproval for anything that's happening with NIL, with revenue sharing, with player salaries or whatever it may be, or even their just status as an employee or not, could significantly make or break how Clemson can survive. We've already seen other universities warn us about not being able to survive if this continues to go down the path of just unchecked, unbalanced spending on players and rosters. It is out of hand, in my opinion. Right now, you have where guys like Quinn Ewers should refuse to go to the NFL because they're not good there. They're not good enough to be one of the best there, and instead stay in college football because they'd make, 10 times more than what they'd make trying to go to the NFL. So if you have that scenario there, we've already saw legislation and arguments from the player's perspective of saying this is a disadvantage to us because you're not allowing us to play 5 years or 6 years. I could see where you're getting into even more of, hey, this is a revenue generating sport that is just loosely tied to the university at this point, outside of just forcing players to go to class. And even that is sketchy, and it's been sketchy for years of going actually to class. But you're going to get to a point where players are going to say, you know what, why are you keeping me away from making the most possible based on my name, image, likeness, or my talent? You're not allowing me to stay in college football indefinitely. I could see that happening. You might say it's crazy, but prepare for disruption, prepare for uncertainty, and prepare for opportunity, because it could be great. Things could work out for the better for certain things, but I don't know. I'm still very skeptical about how all this works out. Clemson and the powers that be must be at the table for this. I don't want just Nick Saban to run everything. Personally, no, I don't. But I like that he's there. I do think he has college football's best interest in mind. But I also know that he's a little bit biased, and he's going to do things that are going to influence certain teams over others. The Tigers and other top universities cannot sit this one out and just let it happen. Media rights, revenue generation, realignment, all that matters as we continue to go. I do believe that the more we get into politics with college sports, it is going to hurt more than help. And so that's kind of my take on it for sure. Do I think players should become employees? Honestly, I do think that there needs to be some sort of structure when it comes to player salaries, at least. I don't know how you would do that, whether or not they need to be employees or not, if you were to do that. But my original suggestion years ago was to have a tiered system based on seniority and based on talent level and production. So you have talent and production being a part of your salary, but also that you're a senior versus a freshman. So a freshman is not going to be able to come in and make what, an all conference, all American senior that is actually proven. A 5-star freshman can't come in and make what a proven all American senior is making. That's the way I would structure it, where it's set salaries or compensation per grade level and per, what you've done on the field. And so the freshmen are going to have to sit out a little bit when it comes to money, because this to me is structured in that way where you reward longevity and consistency with a program, and don't reward just being an unproven high schooler that's really more hype than actual content, for sure.
Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on Amazon Fire TV. Plus, with 4K streaming, watch more than 1.5 million movies, TV episodes, and more from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen.
Mick Cronin adds another depth piece to the front court.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins.
Anthony Peoples Jr. This is a guy that's been well-traveled, been now at his third school committing to UCLA. Saw Ben Bulge post about it, about how Peoples Jr. committed via his IG to go to UCLA. An East Vale kid, went to Corona Centennial. Another high school teammate. All Mick Cronin's trying to do is make this Corona Centennial North, to UCLA. You make it, all right, let's go. Centennial in Westwood. You bring Donovan Dent. You have Eric Freeney, a redshirt freshman. You got Anthony Peoples Jr., who was hurt, didn't make a lot of appearances in his 24-25 campaign. So he's a guy that's 6'9", a little, guy that's just, we're trying to figure out what the depth piece is here. I would think Jamerson might go first. You might think that Booker would get on the court first. UCLA could go small, but this is a guy that won a state championship with UCLA's leading man in the portal in Donovan Dent in 2021 with Corona Centennial. So you hope the kid, after 33 games with 2 starts in 23-24, led his team in blocks. This is a guy that's going to come off the bench from Lewis Clark State, coming from North Carolina Central University after being hurt this last year in 6 games played. He's not coming with a lot of experience at this highest Big Ten D1 level, so it's an upgrade. I think what Mick Cronin's banking on is, hey, we need some depth in the backcourt. We don't have a lot of players after Jamerson, after Booker. If you're going Bilodeau with the 5, it's not like UCLA is bringing somebody 7'3", 6'10" off the bench to come handle when the guys are, too big for them to post. There's no William Kyle. This is where it would have been extremely helpful, unless UCLA was the one that said, Kyle, maybe find somewhere else to go. If they were able to keep William Kyle, I think he could have had some fun run time. I know he was a bit of a project offensively, couldn't make any free throws, but his defensive, his athletic ability, his energy, rebounding the basketball on the defensive end, I think could have helped UCLA this year for the former Bruin. turned transfer, like many of these UCLA players were from last year's squad. Now, are we expecting Peoples Jr. to make an immediate impact? I'm not sure. He would be heading in as what I believe to be a redshirt junior, medical redshirt, after only playing 6 games last season. So after Lewis Clark State going to North Carolina Central, coming to UCLA, it's an interesting look for Mick Cronin, maybe banking on some growth on the depth piece and saying, hey, this is an opportunity you might not get elsewhere. Coming to UCLA and utilizing your athleticism, looking for a new home. I wonder where he fits into the rotation, if at all. But, maybe there's bigger surprises. Maybe this is the steal of the offseason. I'm not going to highlight that necessarily right now. But this is a guy who might, at the beginning of the season, be very buried on the depth chart. And if things go very wrong for the Bruins at the center position, where Booker's not panning out from Michigan State, Jamerson is not working out, if the Bilodeau small ball lineup's not working out, then I think they might go to Peoples Jr., who has yet to put on a lot of tape at this level of college basketball. But he finds a new home. Mick Cronin says, all right, let's go after this. And I hope he knows what he's doing making this happen. All right, this is an interesting transfer in, and this is where UCLA is trying to pick up the pieces, build players who can turn into a center or be serviceable for Mick Cronin's defensive demands. And with this guy who led his team in blocks in his sophomore year, his last full campaign, I like to believe he can do something similar. Just can he handle the Big Ten front when given that opportunity, right? We saw William Kyle could when he led UCLA to a victory with a game-sealing block off the bench. That's the type of role Peoples Jr. will have to fill. A lesser version of a William Kyle III from last year is my perspective on this. And that wasn't a big role, but at some points it was a significant role, leading to UCLA to a victory over Iowa, game-sealing block, maybe big minutes in a later season game, or when the Bruins have traveled a lot during Big Ten play. So we might not see a lot of him early, but maybe he develops over the course of his career at Westwood, however long it might be. He's a state championship winner at the high school level. That's got to mean something. High school teammate of Donovan Dead. Maybe that chemistry can turn into something on the court. That can't be overlooked, but it also can't be overstated and said, hey, he's going to come in and put in 15 and 5 and 15 and 10. That's just not what I expect right away, and that's just my honest opinion about this. So we hope the best. The latest incoming Bruin after a busy April, busy end of March, when the portal opened, when the season ended, they're just a little dormant. And just because these guys are on the portal and the window's closed doesn't mean they can stop committing. And the UCLA Bruins get one now in early May.
Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, you'll have multiple qualified candidates to choose from. And you can create cost-effective growth for your company instead of hiring full-time. Upwork helps find affordable, top-tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today.
Will Garrett Nussmeier be the number 1 overall pick in the 2026 NFL Draft?
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers.
And there's a lot of talk about Garrett Nussmeier, the LSU roster, especially after LSU added 18 additions in the transfer portal, the number 1 portal class in the country, and what this roster looks like. So I want to delve a little bit into that. And for that, we'll have the help of Brad Crawford from 24/7 Sports, who covers college football nationally. And I think this is important, y'all, because it is so important to get the perspective of someone outside of our purview. We often are, I don't want to say victims, because I know when I say victims, that's going to have a negative connotation, but I'm going to say victims of our circumstance because, look, we love LSU. It's why I do this show. It's why you listen to the show, because you love LSU. And so all of our conversation is about LSU. But what about people outside of our silo? What do they think, especially people who cover college football in the grand scheme of things? That's what I'm interested in. So Brad Crawford over at 24/7, which of course is partnered with CBS Sports, had a piece where he basically lauded Garrett Nussmeier as one of the top quarterbacks in the country and LSU as a dangerous college football playoff team. But it goes even beyond that. Todd McShay, who many might remember, was a former ESPN NFL draft analyst who was let go by ESPN with their layoffs, is still working as a draft analyst. Todd McShay put out a way too early 2026 mock draft, because doesn't everybody put out a way too early 2026 mock draft? And he had Garrett Nusmeer going number 1 overall to the New York Jets. And I don't hate the idea of Garrett Nusmeer going number 1 overall. There's a lot to like about that and why it makes sense. Naturally, we've seen 2 quarterbacks here recently at LSU that have followed a similar path. Although Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels were transfers to LSU, they were guys who, by their 4th season in college, became a starter for the first time at LSU, had very solid seasons. And then a year later, for Joe Burrow in 2019, for Jaden Daniels in 2023, they had Heisman caliber seasons where they won the Heisman Trophy. Burrow, of course, won the national championship. Daniels, unfortunately, victimized by the worst defense in the history of LSU football, did not win a national championship. But Burrow went number 1 overall. Daniels went number 2 overall in the draft. So there's actually some synergies there. And remember, Jaden Daniels was coached by Joe Sloan. Now, Mike Denbrock was his offensive coordinator. That's important to remember. But Sloan was the quarterback's coach. And he does deserve a lot of credit for developing Garrett Nusmeer in those years. I mentioned Brad Crawford of 24/7 Sports. I had Brad on my radio show earlier in the week. And I asked him point blank, why do you think Garrett Nusmeer is the best quarterback in college football in 2025? I had to chuckle a little when I heard 3,000-yard, 35 touchdowns, because, man, Nusmeer threw for 4,000 yards a year ago. I've mentioned this before, and shout out to you everydayers because you've heard me say it, but we're going to get to a point in this offseason, in particular as we get toward SEC Media Days, where I start sitting down with a lot of other hosts and people who are in the media around this conference in the country, and I remind them that Garrett Nusmeer is the leading returning passer in college football. There were 5 players a year ago that threw for 4,000 yards. 5. 4 of them are in the NFL. The one returnee is Garrett Nusmeer. He is the leading returning passer in college football, the only returning 4,000-yard passer in college football. He deserves a tremendous amount of the benefit of the doubt. Now, the other thing Brad talked about there is the turnovers. That's something we all talk about. But you know what's so fascinating? When we look at how the season turned out for Garrett, he had 1 pick against USC in the opener. Now, that was a throwaway pick at the end of the game where they were trying to make something happen. You almost washed that. Didn't have a turnover against Nichols. Threw 1 interception against USC on the road. Now, we know there was another that was called back because of penalty. No turnovers against UCLA. So the first 4 games, just 2 interceptions. 2 against South Alabama, which were careless. 2 against Ole Miss, also careless. Had a brilliant game at Arkansas where he did not throw an interception. 23 of 34, 233. And then came the A&M game. 3 interceptions against A&M, 2 interceptions against Alabama, but then didn't throw an interception against Florida, Vanderbilt, or Oklahoma, and then had won in the bowl game. So he finished the season with 29 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the games a season ago, he did not have a turnover. So really, it's more about Nusmeer avoiding the awful play, because by and large, he's been very smart with football, as the evidence would show. You play 13 games. In 6 of them, there's no turnovers at all. And then in the Baylor and South Carolina USC games, 3 of them have 1 turnover. So in 9 of your 13 games, You didn't turn it over. But the problem is the A&M game, which we'll all remember. The 2 turnovers against Ole Miss, one deep in your own territory. Those are the things he's got to purge. And if he does, he'll be fantastic. And I submit that we'll see that meteoric rise in his 5th year in college, his 2nd as a starter at LSU. Be very interesting to see if he follows the same path as guys like Zach Mettenberger, Joe Burrow, and Jaden Daniels. Garrett Nussmeier next in line. We're talking about it plenty here. Pyburn, someone we had on the show when he committed to LSU, and he has psycho energy. I love to say it that way. Pyburn's a guy who didn't have great pass rushing statistics during his 3 years at Florida, but was a very good run stuffing edge. And is a guy who, in his own words, said he is an effective pass rusher, but he wants to become an elite pass rusher. Those are Jack Pyburn's words on this show. And if he becomes that, then that is a major, major, major win for LSU. But even if he doesn't, you have Gabriel Relaford. You have Patrick Payton. You have Jamari Butler. You have Kalaj Cobbins. You have Harold Perkins. You've got plenty of opportunity there. So interesting talking there about the edge rushers. Now, we also mentioned Harold Perkins and Whit Weeks as the best linebacker tandem in college football. It is interesting because, Weeks, of course, was amazing a year ago. He led LSU with 120 tackles, 3.5 sacks. Whit Weeks was awesome. For context, Greg Penn, who wore the number 18 for LSU, was the next leading tackler a year ago at 84. So you went from 120 with Weeks to 84 with Penn, down to 59 with Braden Swinson. So a massive, massive gap from 1 to 2 to 3 on the LSU defense from a season ago. Bringing Harold Perkins back is maybe the most underutilized or undertold story of this entire offseason for LSU. Because it's not just that Perkins is back, and I know some of you likely will roll your eyes because the last couple of years he's played out of position and he hasn't lived up to the hype of the freshman season. But the reason he didn't live up to the hype of the freshman season is he was playing out of position. We've talked about it a ton here. Harold Perkins was trying to be an off-ball linebacker. And I get it. If you're an off-ball linebacker, you're a 3-down linebacker, which means you are more attractive to an NFL team. That's like being a 3rd-down running back versus an every-down running back, if you want that analogy. Well, if you're Harold Perkins and you can't play off the ball, then you become a 3rd-down pass rush specialist. And that makes you less valuable than being an every-down linebacker. So I get it. I get why Harold Perkins wanted to try that, to show NFL teams he could be that. But the reality is he's not that. He's just over 6 foot tall, and he's 220 pounds. That's a dramatic difference from your off-the-ball linebackers who are like Greg Penn, 6'2", 234. Look at Whit Weeks, who's at 6'2", 228. That's just not what Harold Perkins is physically. He is a smaller linebacker that is athletic, that can run in space, that can get TFLs and sacks, can turn and run in coverage, and you have to use him as such. Now, Blake Baker has often said his defense thrives on chaos. He wants to create havoc. Havoc rate is the big thing for Blake Baker. Well, who's the king of that? Harold Perkins. Put him in his natural position, let him run in space and create havoc. If that's something Harold Perkins can do, then LSU's defense will be amazing. You also heard Brad Crawford there talk about the offensive line, Caden Durham. I've told you my feelings on the offensive line. You didn't bring in Braylon Moore. You didn't bring in Josh Thompson to sit. You brought those guys in to start because you knew what you had. It's the same correlation as when Brian Kelly brought in Jaden Daniels right after he was hired. The sentimental fan favorite was Miles Brennan, and I sat here over and over and over and over again and told you they didn't bring in Jaden Daniels to sit. They brought in Jaden Daniels because they knew what they had, and they knew they needed to go get a quarterback. So they went and got Jaden Daniels. And a lot of you didn't like that, but I told you here, that's why they went and got him. He was going to be the starter. The same thing with the offensive line. You went and got Berrien Brown. You went and got Josh Thompson because you knew what you had with DJ Chester as a center, Paul Mabinga as a guard. You plug in two guys who've been 3-year starters or 4-year starters in college football, it makes you instantly better at a spot where you needed to get instantly better, where you lost 4 starters. And then there's Caden Durham. Look, of the top 10 running backs in the SEC from a year ago, 5 are gone. Of the 5 remaining, only 4 running backs. One is Diego Pavia, the quarterback from Vanderbilt. So I love the idea of Caden Durham getting 200 tackles and being a guy, 200 rushing attempts and being a guy that leads the SEC in rushing and is one of the top rushers in college football. And I know last year the offensive line was not great at run blocking. And my theory on the matter is maybe they were never great. Maybe Jaden Daniels was that dynamic that he erased a lot of the issues that group had in run blocking. But now you put in a situation where you got Nusmeer and you have dynamic runners like Caden Durham. Yeah, I think they're going to be really good running behind that big physical offensive line with guys playing in their more natural positions. So just a few thoughts there from an outside perspective.